Hey, hello, this is Jean from the podcast Thrive Not Survive after child abuse, but it's also Saturday, and on Saturday I always go on Instagram Live. So I basically am on two things. One is the podcast that I do almost daily, and then on every Saturday at 10 o'clock Dallas time, I'm going on Instagram Live. So if you have some people who wants to listen in, I will always post this lately on Instagram TV. All these new things that we do. And while I was prepping on it today for this morning, actually early already for doing this talk. Sometimes I do it the day before, and sometimes I do it on the morning what I talk about. Often I have a question, and this week I had no question to answer, so I had to come up with my own question, and I was thinking, maybe I should change my story. Maybe I should tell other things on the podcast and on Instagram Live and the place. I'm always in the middle of your mind is not you. I'm always thinking about changing your mind and you change your life. I'm always about on child and sexual abuse, and I thought maybe I should go in a different direction because I want to have a little bit more audience and stuff like that. But then yesterday something remarkable happened, or maybe not so remarkable. But yesterday I was I was going with Irene, and if you have followed me for a while, Irene is my partner and my dance partner, and so we often go together to things, and we were thinking that we could have a really good business partner, found a business partner who would actually support us. Um, our non-profit organization. We have a non-profit organization called a Dancers Movement to Stop Sexual Abuse, and actually we are always looking for people who can help us, have special skills with us. And if you don't have special skills, or you don't want to use your special skills to help us, then you can always donate to us. But that's not what this podcast is about. But if you want to do that, that's totally awesome, of course, right? Once in a while I'm looking at this camera because this camera is recording something else. Um, so I was going with Irene to a place and it was not so far from our house. It was a really nice place, and there was someone who actually who we believed that could support us, and we had a good conversation with that person. It went in a slightly different direction than we expected, but that's actually not the point of the story. This were three random people that we met there. One was a videographer, and two other people were actually pretty awesome artists, I would say, and they build up some sort of a community. Like nowadays you have all these places where you can work, and then you can rent a place for a day, or you can rent an office for a week, but it's not really your office, so it's actually it's a shared space, and it makes it a lot easier to if you need an office, or you just need a meeting room and stuff like that, to rent just time and space, which gives you more mobility and time, which is part of this podcast. So that's a nice way. I've been looking at this for a while already to do that for maybe if we need some office space, and we do that once a while. We just pay. It's literally $25 in some places. You can work the whole day in a good place where they have good Wi-Fi, and they have good coffee often, and they have good place where you can sit quietly, maybe record things, sometimes invite people. So it could actually be very cheap. Who needs a whole building right nowadays? So you could do that, right? And this place was slightly different. Actually, they did the same thing, but it was more for artists. So there were several painters and other people, a musician, and so they rented their space. And it was also open for other things, like you could go on stage there and maybe make some music. So people could rent their space for as much time and as little time as you need, and it was all a little bit in the artsy fartsy corner, stuff like that. And those people were very. So one of them actually invited us and said, "Hey, maybe we can help you and work together." don't get too much detail. I don't want to track you down that person, but it was really cool. But the remarkable thing is, remember, I met three random people, two men and one woman, and then of course Irene and I were there already. But we met those three people, and they heard about my story because that's why they were thinking and are thinking of supporting us. But it was just remarkable that those three random people had just these horrible stories. There was this woman, and she was abused when she was young, and later on a few more times. But in total, her whole life, it was over 10 people. It's just like what? Like what 10? That's like crazy. The other person was married in an abusive in with someone who was abused, and he had a really hard time to. They had a really hard time to come together on these things, and I'm not saying that's the reason why they're not married anymore, but it had a huge influence on their relationship, and so that's another story. And then the third person, who was a man, I guess he's about my age, and he used to be a member of Boy Scouts, and he was very abused there, right? So you have three different strangers that we just met randomly, right? It was not entirely randomly because we knew that they wanted to support our cause, but in the end it was still randomly, and you could see how many people are affected by basically the same issue as abuse. So when I was thinking this morning maybe I should change my story, actually I immediately said no. Actually, no. I should step up. I should actually do more with my story, not my personal story, but the things that I'm doing in the world. Yeah, I know the audience is not where I want it to be, but it needs to be there. If I just can meet just three random people and they all have their own story, and they're all in their different pockets, and it's almost like a secret, right? They were willing to talk to me openly about it because it is what I do, right? The other woman that we met is also very active in trying to raise awareness, but um, so you have people more like me who do that, but the other people were maybe a little bit more quiet about it, and so it was remarkable. So for a moment I thought maybe I should do other things in life. Maybe I should change my story. Maybe I should do a little bit more positive things, right? Maybe I should just go into, I don't know, whatever you can come up with, right? But not this. This is all ugly stories, and why would I do that? It makes me, almost borderline depressed sometimes. So why would I do all these things, right? But then those just three strangers gave me more the motivation to do actually more of it, right? And one of the things that I could help them with is I did a podcast, and I think I forgot, maybe it was on Instagram Live too, where I actually calculated down for everyone that I'm almost sure it was on Instagram, that every second that I am talking, or every second that you are listening, right, there is one new victim in the world. Somewhere in the world, every second will be abused, and the moment that we talk. Can you believe that? Every second? Just hold on. Just hold your breath for a minute. Yeah, that's 60 new people. Just do it for a time. Just think about it. An average movie is, I don't know, it's 90 minutes, and then 19 time, it's 90 minutes, and then 90 times 60. Do you know how many people those are? Every second a new one, right? But I started to talk about something more. I think it's even more serious than that. It's really bad, and people think, yeah, okay, that's all cool, cool, Sean. It's a lot of people, and it's really bad. What can I do about it? But sometimes you have to think about, okay, what is then the real impact on the world of all these victims, right? So when plastic first was invented, it was like the best thing since sliced bread. Everyone's thinking like plastic, that's so great, and it never goes away. You can use it. It was really cool, right? I mean, plastic bags, and we had all these new plastic products. Tupperware came out, and everyone thinks was like and that literally is, I don't have to go even far before I was born. when plastic came into existence, right? It was already there when I was born, but it was not used to that time. So in a period of less than 50 years, this became suddenly like a huge world problem. And a lot of people start to see it right now. So plastic straws, a lot of big companies hopefully are going to not use it anymore. And because it hurts not just the environment because it looks ugly, but it starts to hurt a lot of animals, stuff like that, and it basically hurts our lives. So a lot of people are jumping on that bandwagon right now and saying, okay, we need to do something about it because it affects everyone, right? Talking about plastic. And if you think about that for a moment, I mean, I'm digressing just a little bit, but in the Caribbean Sea right now, there is floating an island as big as the state of Texas. And if you don't know how the big state of Texas is, think about like a country of France. You know, that's how big it is, right? Of plastic, floating bottles, you know, plastic bags and stuff like that. There is just like, it's not something that you just say, hey, let's go in there and row there and take your bottles out. No, we need to be very careful nowadays what we do with so we start to understand, we start to get an awareness that we have to do that. People, you know, do that. Now let's go back now to abuse, and I did that for those three people, and Irene of course was with me, listening to this. I said, you know, the 1 million, one person per second. That's a lot of people in a day, and that's a lot of people in a year. 30 million, if you calculate that through. By the way, I did that, of course, every year. And do you know that 80% of people who are somewhat sexually abused, right? You know, will end up having a period, or if not their whole life, they suffer from depression and anxiety. You know, that's not a pretty story, I know that. But can you imagine all these people that we add up year after year suffering from depression and anxiety? Do you understand what that means, right? Sometimes we wonder why the world is so negative, right? And why there is so many bad things in the world, right? Do you think that positive people produce more positive things than negative people who are depressed? It's not because depressed people want to produce negative things in the world, not at all. But it just happens to them. You know, even, you know, if you know someone who is very depressed, of course we want to help those people, right? But it's not very nice to be around them the whole time. It's just not, right? And it's not their fault that they are depressed, so we need to help them. But can you imagine what hold that has on the world, right? What hold it holds the world literally down from progressing to a more positive thing in the world, because we have added up year after year, decades after decades, people who are doing this. So that has become my new message, right? We have to change that. And I was always wondering about how can we stop sexual abuse when it happens to young kids like I was myself, because you don't know when that happens, right? There's not a flag waving outside, oh wait a minute, here is a kid being abused, because it's not, right? It's not billboard, you cannot read it in the newspaper, you can only read it after the fact, if people like me even talk about it. And people talk about it, it's an average of 19 years, 1919, before someone starts to talk about their own child abuse, if they talk about it at all. So there is almost no way to prevent it if it happens in a domestic situation, right? I'm actually waving with a paper here because I have a few pointers how you actually can you know, prevent it maybe in a non-domestic situation, which is good. I listened to a couple who was doing that work, and I think they do marvelous work. But what they forget is that most of the abuse actually happens in a domestic situation. So there's no way we can do it. And I was actually thinking about maybe I should stop actually fighting for this, because how would I be able to stop this if you can't even get to the people? And then I was talking to other people and saying, and was thinking, you know, okay, maybe we can change something in education, and that's probably a good idea. Maybe we can raise awareness. That's all good idea. How can we really stop it? One of the things that we know from abuse people is that the people who are abused tend to abuse themselves too. And that's because of their miscrewed way of looking at the world, the fears, the anxiety, and the depression that has built up caused them to do awful things in the world as well. It was not even their fault. right? So I'm not saying that okay, we need to forgive, we need to be okay with all the people who are doing that. But if we find a way to make everything a little bit more positive, I can guarantee you those numbers will automatically drop down, right? And people who are self-conscious, I know my sister is listening, by the way, nowadays, today, which is great, and she's a great yoga instructor and stuff like that. So they become more self-aware, and people who become more self-aware become also more. They become also more aware of the things around them. Typically, they have a positive influence in the world. So if we send everyone to a yoga school, that will be a really good thing. Or another thing, right? So that's another way to help people is do more positive things. Just be more positive, active in the world, and the things will do. But most people who are seriously depressed because of their abuse, they don't even can get there, right? So we need to find another way to do that. But we need to first come together as the people who are a little bit more on the positive side of life, that we need to see that this is a problem that needs to be solved. Does that make sense? Like the problem of plastic. A lot of people in the world start now to see we need to solve this problem fast. We cannot wait 2 more or 3 more generations to solve this problem, because then the problem has solved itself by mainly we destructed the little globe that we live upon, right? So we start to see that, right? And I always, not always, but lately I use this example of the bees, like the bzz bee, right? Did you know that the bees are about to be extinct, right? Did you know that? Did you know that the bees are about to be extinct? And that would take us 5 more years, and then the human beings would not be there. That's how important the bees are. If we would die, all as human beings, right? The bees would still be there, right? If we die as human beings, the bees would still be there. But if the bees dies, we won't be there. It takes less than 5 years. And now let me make a connection here with coronavirus, right? I know it's really bad. It's really bad for people who are in the industry that I am in, and in many more industries. It's basically, it's almost like a killing for the industry. But there is, strangely enough, in any bad thing that we have in life, you can also see good things, right? It also gave us a gift to see what we did to nature. Because in the beginning of COVID, from March till, let's say, June, July, there was way less traffic on the street than actually, if I can see it now, it's all coming back. And do you know, in many places, nature started to revive itself in less than 6 months. In less than 6 months, many places, water became more clean, birds came back in less than 6 months. Can you only imagine if we would be a little bit more conscious about what we do to the earth, how quickly Earth would come back? Deepak Chopra said recently, he had a talk with Sadhguru. If you don't know who he is, find him up, right? Look them up, and they say, if we human beings would leave the earth alone for less than 5 years, everything would be back to normal. So that's a great thing, right? So we start to become a little bit more earth conscious, as I call that, right? There are 4 levels of consciousness, if you have listened to me last week. A little bit more conscious about the environment that we live in. But we also have to take about the environment that we take with our minds. Not my personal environment alone. Not the personal environment of the people that are listening to us alone, right? It's our collective mental environment that we need to start to see that those are connected as well. Now, I've been busy with this for a long time. I've never said it so strong as now, but can you imagine again, every second today, every second that we live, we produce one person that is very likely to become very depressed in life. Every second that I talk. Yeah, if you think that true, it's about 30 million people in a year, right? That we add to the world that become depressed and have anxiety. That doesn't produce anything positive in the world, people. That's a thing we need to do. And if you feel somewhat connected to what I just said, I know it's a little bit abstract, then just send me a little message, forward this podcast. I know, I rather do a dance and show you a cha-cha-cha or a Roomba with Irene. Trust me, Irene and I would rather do that than anything else and make nice videos on YouTube like that, we probably get way more likes than that. But we also need to listen to the stories that really matters. And it's really a little bit weird to say, but I do think my story matters, right? And so, starting a little movement. Irene and I started this 2 years ago, a densest movement to stop sexual abuse. And it's not only for the personal hurt that people have through it, but it's actually to have a much bigger impact on the earth and the people they will live with. Not only for me anymore. I'm an old dude, right? It doesn't really matter for me anymore so much. But I have 2 kids, and my kids hopefully gets 2 kids too. And most people that are online are, way over 20. So we can already think about there is an organization behind us. All of you are online, have nephews and nieces, right? And if you look at yourself and say, do we leave the earth behind for the next generation in a better shape than we found it? Really stuff that we leave behind it, or from a mental point of view, right? We have to say no. Maybe the people that are listening to my podcast, yes, they do a good point, but as a collective human being, it's actually going down, down, and down, right? So we have to do that. Like the people are now doing, attacking plastic in the sea, and they're doing an awesome job. It's going really well, seriously, right? So it can be done. It can be done in a few years, right? Don't give up. These are a little bit harder things to attack. But that's what this podcast is about. This is what my story is about, right? It's not always fun and giggles. I know I'm a fun guy, but not always, right? All right, this was Shah at Instagram Live, and at the same time I was on my podcast, Thrive Not Survive After Child Abuse. Thank you for listening. I will post this soon, by the way, in Instagram TV. If you have any questions, or you feel you were connected to this story and you don't know what you could do about it, just send me a message, right? And I'll give you a couple of pointers how you actually can help us with this. We would be so much obliged and honored to help you. It's awareness not only for ourselves anymore, guys. It is definitely for the generations to come. I will say this every week, even if I get tired of this story, I will say it because the story has not been heard enough. All right, this was Shah. Hope to see you soon. Bye bye.